Hello, thank you for joining me for this review for the book whose thumbnail you clicked on, essentially. It is The Poisons We Drink by Bethany Baptiste, and from the look of the thumbnail, you've probably said this is a young adult. You might even have realized it was an audiobook. Now, I did not realize it was a young adult book when I borrowed it. Once again, I am a fatality of our appallingly bad library app, Libby, which it resets the settings on you in the middle of searches. What can I say? I don't really regret reading this book, though. It was by a young author who hasn't written very many books, and I think she did a good job with this. There's many good things about this. I'm not really the target audience by a couple of decades, but I didn't dislike this book overall. The narration wasn't too bad. It had a couple of flaws, but anyway, let's go to the world building, because the world building was really what I liked the most about this book. It will probably feel vibrantly young, innovative and exciting to many younger readers, but for those of us who are old enough to remember Charlaine Harris's Sookie Stackhouse series, it's very similar to that one. In the Dead series by Charlaine Harris, the vampires had come out of the closet as having been around humanity forever, and the world had to reshuffle itself to fit that, and then eventually a whole heap of other supernatural beings came out of the closet as well. In The Poisons We Drink, we are situated in a world post-witches coming out. Now, they're not witches, they call themselves witchers, as in the video game TV series Witches, as far as I can tell. That might be an audiobook thing. I haven't read this with my eyes, but the narration made it sound like witchers. And this world we're introduced to in a couple of different stages. The first one by a normal man who's come to a witch's bar in search of a witch to perform a spell, we think initially for him, but eventually it becomes clear he needs someone to make a potion for him. It's an interesting little introduction to the world and the dichotomy between the two races. The witches have come out, but apparently a lot of humanity aren't happy about it. And they're living under restricted circumstances that are very apartheidy. Then we switch to our main protagonist, Venus. Venus is a very young woman. She's just turned 18 at the beginning of the story. And her reality is sort of built slowly for us. The reality of her feeling isolated and victimized and apartheidy by humanity is early established. The fact that she's good at what she does and that she's got some sort of internal cursed entity living inside her skull, which provides a large amount of the whole reasoning for what she's going through. She lives with her family. Her family are apparently the big thing. Her mother's Clarissa Stoneheart, who is not nice. She's got a younger sister called Janice that she apparently loves. Whole family connection sort of thing. Now, when I started this book, the first thing it read out was a huge number of content warnings. It was content warnings out the wazoo for just about everything. And that was actually quite promising to me. I thought, okay, we're up for a fairly gritty novel in which there's some hard-hitting things that happen. I respect the fact that the author is trying to make sure that no one is triggered by her novel. I did not personally feel that there was anything triggering in it, really. But then again, I'm not her target audience. If her protagonist, Venus, is 18, and from her online picture, the author is in her early 20s, early to mid-20s, I would say, that's probably the age of audience that this is aiming for. I'm not that. Venus's point of view is the main one for this novel, and she is very young. She's reasonable as an 18-year-old. She's written as an 18-year-old, and that works. I like it. But because she has just turned 18, living in this world, there's a lot of teenage angst, and there's a lot of parents are the enemy. Her mother is unloving, cold and hard, and her whole family hates her. And this seems to be only seen from the point of view of Venus, who doesn't like her mother, doesn't seem to have minded her mother teaching her to be a potions witch, but does object to everything else that Clarissa does. The father is dead. Clarissa's brother tries to mitigate her cold-hearted ways, but doesn't succeed. It's not what I would call gritty. I would call it teenaged angst. Now, as well as the parents are the enemy theme that I have to say was a little bit much, Venus's point of view is that of a teenager who isn't really thinking the world through the way an adult would, which is fine. She is a teenager. You'd expect that. But to an adult reading this, once again, it's not really your cup of tea, because the way the story presents in the first part, which I'm mainly going to talk about, because I think a lot of people would actually enjoy reading this book, and I don't want to talk about the later part as much. In this early part, we've got Venus, who's really, really unhappy and home, and it seems strongly as though 60% of her troubles are being caused by her mother, and so a large number of the troubles in her life could actually be eliminated from the slate quite easily by leaving home. Since she's presented as being part of a larger Witcher community and having an extended family, there doesn't seem to be any real reason why she stays under conditions which seem quite horrible. And that sense of inevitability, lack of agency in your life, and parents are the enemy, the government hates you, all of society is against you, it's young. It's younger than I really needed. I don't think it's bad in the book context of the book, and I think many people will really love and relate to it. I'm just not the person. So, despite all those warnings, the book really isn't gritty as they suggest. It's actually, to my eyes, ears, thoughts, a little bit bland, because it's so much Venus POV, and Venus is not that complex a character, even by an 18-year-old's standards. Now, I feel that a large reason for this book's existence is the author trying to make socio-political statements about racism, apartheid, society, political stuff, and I think that she has incorporated them so integrally into the story that the story actually works on its own without thinking of them. But you can't really ignore them. They're always there. And they're not particularly complex. Socio-political things are complex and complicated and nuanced. And in this book, they're not really. To the extent that they really didn't work for me. They were too superficial, too one-sided. But again, I am definitely not the demographic. If you clicked on this thumbnail because you have read this book and you loved it, tell me that they worked for you. There's a lot of very high reviews for this book on Goodreads, and not all of them look as if they're particularly young people, so I would say that this will work for many people. However, those socio-political elements that were not nuanced enough for me, a lot of it comes down to this us versus them mentality of witches versus humans. I felt it was odd, and I think overall it was poorly done. The big flaw in that is that witches have apparently existed side by side with humans for as long as humans have existed, and humans haven't noticed until witches came out and said, hey, here we are. The whole world, by the way, is America as far as I can remember. But, you know, you get that from American writers. So if they've passed as humans for centuries, I would expect that passing for humans again is not hard. One of the political things that is going on in the background of the story is they're trying to introduce a bill to force witches to declare themselves. That means that not all witches do declare themselves. That means that they don't have to live in a ghetto. That means that they can basically disperse into the country and the rest of the world even, and live their lives as humans if they want to. Or maybe find places where people just don't care, because there always are places where people don't care. These options aren't tabled as far as I can remember at any point. Now, at the same time that witches have always passed for humans, we are told that there are some difference, and one of them is that their body heat runs higher. So you've got shops that are equipped with sensors that will sense your body heat when you go in. Venus's father, whose name I've forgotten, died a martyr in protests following the 12 legislation, something like that. It's a big deal in the book. What it means is that you can't have more than 12 witches in one location at any one time, because they've lost the right to congregate, leading to a whole heap of side plots, because younger sister Janice, who I haven't seen much about, wants to go partying all the time and wants Venus to go with it. And parties, of course, are banned. So the 12 by 12. Yeah. Again, if that's the only way that you can be detected, it seems odd to me that whenever Venus goes out for any reason, there's this long rigmarole about her putting on wigs and disguises. It's like, you could just dye your hair? I don't know. It didn't feel like the Witcher visibility held together, and it in the same way that it didn't feel like the ghetto mentality really held together either. Now, gritty warnings. One thing that did bother me is not, I think, one of the warnings that we'll be warned about. I don't think that the author found it upsetting, and it doesn't seem like most of the reviewers did either. The racial hatred was quite disturbing, but not the way you'd expect. The witch's true loathing for humans was regularly endemic hatred, and it seemed to exceed the dislike that humans had for witches most of the time. And there's always splinter groups, and splinter groups who carry around iron to injure witches are a big deal, and subplots again. But the loathing that witches have to humans and their desire to humiliate them, as happens first thing in the book, in the bar when a human is looking for a witcher, it didn't ring very pleasantly to me. And I don't think that was a point being made. I don't think that was it. Okay. Later in the book, Venus has to make some tough decisions about the choices that she makes. And I've got to say that there's a level of hypocrisy from there, because if we're talking about witches, i.e. Venus and Janet, I'm pretty sure it was Janice, wanting freedom, free will, autonomy, etc., etc., then you've got Venus, who makes potions that if you give them to someone, usually against their will force them to be something they're not. And well, very early in the book, when she deals with the first case of a human buying a potion, a little bit of a twinge is raised about the actual remorse element of doing something that basically takes away a person's free will. It's not gone into very much, and I don't think really it ever is. She later makes bigger and worse support potions, and again, there's not any sort of double thinking about whether this is right or not. And young adult books can do this. Hunger Games, you've got Katniss, who is constantly remorseful about actions, perhaps a bit too much remorseful at times even. But Venus and her world don't seem to be. I feel like there should have been more of an actual examination of, is it right to force someone to do something against their will, against their morals and ethics? You could have at least visited that in passing. Anyhow, now onto the writing. It's okay for its purposes. Reading this after having read things like George Orwell and some of the earlier things that I've been writing, it's not George Orwell. But for you that might be very good, because Orwell is a lot for someone who just wants a pleasant, easy book to read. This is a very, very readable and probably much more suited for its target audience than Orwell's essays would be. And its pacing, however, is a bit odd, and I think even its target audience will find it a bit odd in places. So it goes from being very, very down the line, talking about small activities, the meanings of the actual spiritual meanings of flowers, such as white tulips or yellow chrysanthemums. There's a big flower element. I quite like that. And then it'll suddenly explode into an action sequence. Okay, so it's a bit patchy. Again, not bad, just not fantastic. I can see that the author, Bethany Baptiste, may well be a really formidable author one day, but she's young and this is one of her earlier books. There's some smoothening of the way that I think could happen in her future writing life, but I wouldn't put it past myself to be in 10 years reading one of her books and going, yeah, she's matured into an excellent writer. Now, so aside from the problematic elements, ethical elements, and everything else, overall, good book for its target audience. The narration, however, is divisive. I've seen reviews that loved it. I didn't love it. I thought it was good. Far better than some others. We had one real problem, and that was the narrator characterized Janice, who appears quite a bit, with a squeak. Sorry, chicken. Sorry, baby. In fact, the first time that I had this audio book playing in my house and Janice's voice came up, my bird squealed and flew across the room in horror. It's that high-pitched and squeaky, and he still doesn't love it. I also don't love it when it's in earbuds while I'm jogging. Going from Venus, who talks like a human being, to Janice, who talks like a dog whistle, not great. Other than that, it's pretty good, and I have seen people who really like the squeaky element because it made Janice seem annoying, which she was meant to be. Yes, she was very annoying. She was very annoying. And the affection between the two sisters, which is a major leg that this whole plot rests on, is not convincing. Is not convincing at all. Also, of course, as a grown-up, I'm more likely to feel that adults weren't treated fairly in this. But if you're a young adult, a teenager, YA, apparently new adult is a thing, really young, you've got problems with your parents and other adults, you don't trust the government, and a few other elements, this may be the book for you. It's not terrible. It's just not as good as it could have been, I personally feel. Many other people think it's a 5 out of 5 stars. Maybe you're one of them. Tell me how wrong I am. I'm willing to be wrong about this. For you, not for me. Read good books.